Organic Gardening magazine actually almost never made a profit in its long life. But it was the passion project, mostly of my father, actually. My father was the one who's like, we can't shut this magazine down. So the most important thing to my grandfather was health. And to him, that meant no added chemicals or pesticides or fertilizers.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Linley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic label distinguishing crops grown in healthy soils and animals raised on pasture, all without synthetic fertilizers or toxic chemicals. You just heard from Maria Rodale, the daughter of Bob Rodale and granddaughter of J.I. Rodale. They're the publishers of Organic Gardening and Farming magazine and founders of the Rodale Institute, which launched a long-running organic farming systems trial in 1981 that continues to the present. Maria graciously shares some personal insights into her family and her own thoughts about what it will take to reignite the organic movement in the marketplace alongside the big brands that dominate supermarket shelves.
All right, welcome to the Real Organic Podcast, and I'm talking today with Maria Rodale. Maria, you are part of the most famous family in organic in America. Your grandfather, J.I., really brought organic to the United States from England. Of course, there had been organic farming in this country, but as a movement, as a political movement, he was the first. Can you tell me, out of the annals of family history, how he came to become an organic champion?
I would love to. But first of all, let me just say it's great to be here and be talking with you on the Real Organic Project podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
So he was very curious about everything and also determined to break the health curse of his family, which was a lot of people dying very young of heart attacks and other illnesses. So he kind of went on a healing journey to figure out how to be healthy. And he read a lot of books. And it wasn't until he read Sir Albert Howard's book that he kind of made this connection in his brain that, how you grow food determines how healthy the food is and then how healthy you are. So he also, at the same time, he wanted to get rich. A poor Jewish guy from the Lower East Side of Manhattan. He wanted to get out of Manhattan and make a lot of money. He read Horatio Alger and John Rockefeller. He wanted to make his mark in the world. So he started by buying a farm in Connecticut. Then, because he married my grandmother and she was from Pennsylvania, they ended up settling in Pennsylvania, also for economic reasons, because he and his brother had a electronics business. And during the Depression, labor, buildings were cheap in Emmaus, Pennsylvania. And so he started experimenting. He started eating food that he grew himself, and he started to feel better. And that's when he said, I want to launch a magazine called Organic Gardening and Farming, which he did in 1942.
Yeah, that's early, of course.
Yeah.
In the organic movement, it's early. I don't know, when did Albert Howard's first book come out? I think that was Agricultural Testament.
Yeah, I think it was in the 20s or 30s.
Oh, it had to be late 30s, I think.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did your grandfather find Albert Howard? Did he read a book?
He actually read about it in a British health magazine, and that's how he found out about the book. So, he was a voracious reader, and always kind of exploring. So he read Sir Albert Howard's book. Then he actually started corresponding with him, so that Sir Albert Howard was part of the launch of Organic Gardening magazine. And one of my grandfather's greatest regrets was that he never got to meet him.
Never got to meet him in person, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were other parts of the movement happening in and around Pennsylvania. The Pfeiffer with biodynamic agriculture and was happening as well. But it was the act of publishing a magazine that spread the word that really made him the leader of that movement.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, did he connect with Pfeiffer?
This is something as I've told you, I'm writing a history of the organic movement in America, and this is something I have not quite pinned down yet. So I have no evidence of it as of yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just interesting how these early people wove together or didn't, and developed almost in isolation. Do you happen to know, did he connect with Lady Eve Balfour in England?
I don't think in person, but he definitely revered her book. So her book, The Living Soil, didn't come out until after Organic Gardening started publishing. Magazine started publishing. I think that was published in 43 or 45, 44. Yeah. But I mean, they were all fast friends, probably by correspondence than in person.
Yeah, yeah. That book's out of print now. And I was thinking Rodale Press ought to reprint it. It's amazing that, because somebody wrote me, I cited it in the interview we released Sunday, and they said, I can't get the book. I've been hunting for it, and the only copy cost $240. So, be good. It was a very readable book, very interesting.
Well, as you know, Rodale Press doesn't exist anymore. The Rodale Institute is considering publishing books, but the nonprofit is what exists now, not the printing publishing company.
Well, I was going to go there at some point, so let's just check in on that. So I know that Hearst, I believe it was Hearst who bought Rodale Press.
Yes.
I didn't know they dropped the name.
No, well, Rodale, we changed the name of the company from Rodale Press to Rodale Inc. in the early 2000s, because we weren't actually printing anything. We were just publishing, and we were also getting into digital and things like that. So, but we sold the publishing company in 2018 to Hearst, and they kept the magazines and then sold the books to Penguin Random House. So Rodale Books still exists at Penguin Random House.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Things keep moving around. Okay, so just to go back to, I'm not even not sure how you pronounce it. I've read it so many times. Emmaus. So going back to Emmaus, where J.I. and your grandmother, and I don't know her name. What was her name?
Anna,
where they had a small farm, and then they decided to start a magazine, and both to spread the gospel and also to make some money, to make a living.
Yeah. So my grandfather and his brother set up the electrical factory in Emmaus. And then my grandfather, he actually started publishing other magazines before he and books before he published Organic Gardening. So, I mean, he wanted to be a gentleman publisher. And but Organic Gardening was the first magazine that kind of really had a mission and made a difference and stuck around for a long time.
Okay, so he became a famous spokesperson. He went out and spoke at a lot of places. I told you before we started that Elliot Coleman told me that he testified very eloquently to Congress about the Delaney Clause which is a rule that they cannot include carcinogenic substances as ingredients for processing, and yet, of course, they do. So that's a the clause has been ignored quite a bit since then. What was that like? How old were you when he died?
I was 9 when he died. So, and what's been, kind of interesting about, not only was I only 9 when he died, but during the greater part of my life, I was focused on the business, not the organic industry. So writing this book has been really like putting all the pieces together and learning about the things that I didn't know about. You're not born knowing what your parents knew or what your grandparents knew. You have to study it. So, I mean, I remember him as a person less than a public figure.
Yeah. So what was he like as a person?
He was funny and rude. Like, he wasn't afraid to say what he thought. He was not a gardener or a farmer. He was always in a suit or shirt sleeves. So he just was like filled with joy and laughter and lots of crazy ideas. And the farm that I grew up on, his farm, the organic farm, and it was just a magical, wonderful place to grow up. Because they were artists also. My grandmother was a painter. There was, a sculpture garden and beautiful landscaping and lots of music and art filled the house. So it wasn't like they were hippies. They were not hippies. In fact, at first they were appalled by the hippie movement until they realized that they were helping them spread the word. And then, and then my grandfather fell in love with them.
Well, that's interesting. So what appalled them at first?
Well, the same thing that appalled most adults, sort of long hair, dirty,
Yeah.
kind of.
It certainly exploded organic gardening and farming.
Yes. Yeah.
When I was a kid, my best friend's mom had an organic garden, and she read organic gardening every issue, and every issue was pretty similar to the last issue. But from that, she became a very good gardener, and she grew incredible food. And I was amazed when I look back that as a teenager, as a 16-year-old, we loved the food that she served us. And they were who they were, and they made dinner kind of a sacred space, and they really paid attention to eating good food, and not in a heavy way, it was just delicious.
Yeah. And that's something that I think has been an area of misperception about the organic and health movement, because it's always been getting co-opted by different sects, whether it's kind of the hardcore health nuts, which don't want any fat or anything, or even vegetarians. That, not that there's anything wrong with any of these groups, but the original concept was delicious food grown as locally and organically as possible. So they weren't vegetarians, they weren't eccentric in what they ate. They just wanted it really fresh and clean and good.
Yeah. And so talking about clean or fresh, I get. Local, I get. Clean is more complicated, so obviously without pesticides on it.
Right.
But I think did it also mean to him, because certainly that was in the magazine a lot, that living soil, how that soil was fertilized, had a lot to do with how the food turned out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think hydroponics was invented back then. So it was all about the soil. And but the soil, like he really was more concerned about health than actually gardening and farming. And so when he launched Prevention Magazine in 1950, that magazine took off right away and became very profitable. Organic Gardening Magazine actually almost never made a profit in its long life. But it was the passion project, mostly of my father, actually. My father was the one who's like, we can't shut this magazine down. So, the most important thing to my grandfather was health. And to him, that meant no added chemicals or pesticides or fertilizers. And also supplementing when necessary with for nutrition.
Yes, he did a lot of supplements, didn't
He
he?
was a big vitamin taker.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I believe he also was a pretty strong anti-vaxxer.
I don't. I haven't found evidence that he was an anti-vaxxer.
Okay.
I have found evidence that he questioned them,
Yeah.
but definitely we were all vaxxed.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
This was not like the hill he was going to die on. He was really against fluoride, not because fluoride itself was the issue, but because it was artificial fluoride that was being put in waters. So he didn't question that fluoride was important for healthy teeth, but he was very upset when people were, when the government was putting artificial fluoride into water.
So he was looking for, as much as possible, natural diet, unprocessed foods,
Yes.
not agricultural chemicals.
Right.
And to him, this was the path to health.
Yes.
Now, he did not live to be an old man, but
he lived to his, I think 71 he died in 71. He was 73. He lived longer than all his siblings.
All his siblings, indeed.
Yeah, except maybe one. I think there was one woman who lived longer than him.
What age was his father when he died? Do you
50.
know? 50, yeah.
Yeah.
See, I come from a similar place. My father was 42 when he died.
Yeah.
And he was a farmer. And, it seemed awfully young.
Yeah. And his brother, who was his best friend and business partner, actually died of a heart attack at 54. So
yeah,
this was a real fear for him.
Sure. So J.I. did pretty well considering the family history.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your dad? Does the world call him Bob or Robert?
Bob.
Bob, I thought so, but I didn't want to assume. So, what was your relationship like with him first?
By the time he died, we were very, very close, and very aligned in our thinking. Growing up, he was missing a lot of the time, because he was traveling. He was an Olympic skeet shooter, so he was off around the world training for shoots and winning world championships, and most of our vacations were at gun clubs. And if we went on a actual vacation, he always had to go home early because he was, he didn't want to leave the business. So he was a little, anxious and, not as present as, but that was the era also.
Right.
And then once I got through my horrific teen years, is when we started to connect intellectually and spiritually. Actually, he was he was really exploring kind of spiritual stuff. In fact, I just found a postcard he sent me while I was in boarding school. And what I didn't know, what I learned from interviewing Elliot for my book, Elliot Coleman, was that Elliot had taken my father and a couple of other people on a tour of organic gardens in Europe. And so this was a postcard I had gotten and didn't realize what it was. And it was from his trip in Europe. And he was like, yeah, the Europeans are very spiritual about organic farming. And it's like, remind me to tell you about body dousing when I get home. I don't ever remember him telling me about body dousing, but
that was actually a famous trip. It wasn't just a couple of other people. It was USDA scientists. And your dad was the volunteer driver for the entire trip because he liked to drive. But they weren't just visiting gardens, they were visiting big farms, and the scientists were blown away because
Yeah.
there was the living proof, undeniable, that this worked.
Right.
And
And
they
that,
were like, I have to
I
rethink everything.
I didn't know about that till I heard it from Elliot, because I was off in boarding school, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
So your dad was building the business into a much bigger business in that time.
building the business, definitely. And then he was also really, his priority was proving that organic farming was a viable way to farm. And that's when he started the farming systems trial at the Rodale Institute in 1980. And that was his true passion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What came of those trials? Well, tell me about them. I know about Lady Eve's trials. Tell me about Bob Rodale's trials.
Well, Lady Eve's trials were really important, but they weren't like scientifically independently verifiable. So my father was very obsessed with getting it as like kind of scientific as possible. So he hired Dick Harwood, who was a PhD out of one of the land grant universities, and they set up this side by side. Originally, it was called the transition study because he wanted to study how long it takes for an organic farm to heal, to become safe and get rid of all the chemicals, because the farm he bought had been chemically farmed for a long time. And then after about 5 years of that, he realized, okay, it takes 3 years. And that's where he came up with the concept of regeneration, because he saw that, oh, this organic farming is actually regenerating not just the land, but, and the soil, but the people who are working on it, the biodiversity is all regenerating. And so it's still actually going on today. You can come visit it at the Rodale Institute. And we've expanded it to include, obviously, GMOs, because we want to be best practice chemical compared to best practice organic. We have no-till versus low-till plots. So we're testing tillage. And then we also have what I call vegan organic, which is like green mulches, and versus animal manure, brown mulches and fertilizers. So we're doing all these variables and testing the water as it runs off. And from this study, I mean, people have come from all around the world to see it and to learn from it. And it's been replicated around the world as well in other places. But this is where we were one of the first to discover that organically farmed soil stores more carbon than chemical soil. And definitely is more resilient in times of drought and flood, because the soil is more absorbent, and it's alive, of course, and that it's also more profitable for farmers. So come visit.
Yeah, I would love to, Maria. I'm curious about the last point, because of course that's a bit of a crusher. I know lots of organic farmers who are desperately struggling. And I also think if it's more profitable, why doesn't everybody go there?
So this is the area that's been most interesting to me personally, and which I kind of examined in my book, Organic Manifesto, because I wanted to understand, if it works, why aren't people doing it? And so I actually did focus groups, because my background is in business and marketing and strategy, and so I was like, let's do focus groups with chemical farmers to find out what's stopping them. And the first thing I found out is that chemical farmers are the most focused group of people in the country. Like, you have to pay them to show up, and preferably feed them to show up, because they get so many invitations from chemical companies and things like that. So what I learned is that they are so emotionally plugged in to the ad campaign that we have to feed the world, and the only way to feed the world is through chemicals. And they're surrounded by a system that's all they know how to do. And so when you ask them, where do you get your information about farming? And they say, well, from my chemical dealer. You know? So they're literally kind of in a bubble that is hard for them to get out of. And when the only time that they actually do get out of it is when somebody in their family gets sick and they start to question. And then for a lot of these guys, especially the older men, they don't want to feel like their whole life was spent doing something bad. So there's the science, but the emotion is what really drives behavior. And that's our challenge, is to get through on an emotional level to everyone.
Yeah. And obviously, the people promoting that bubble, building that bubble, are making a great deal of money out of it. It is their whole livelihood. It is their profit. And so they're not only, I see a lot of people in the organic movement, and they are doing this because they want to do something, the right thing. They want to do something good. And I'm not saying that people who are chemical farmers don't want to do the right thing, but I'm saying they're being convinced by people. I ultimately think they don't care about that. They care about making money.
Well, yeah. So they feel like they're feeding the world. So that's I feel good about myself and what I'm doing. But at the end of the day, it's their financial livelihood.
Sure.
But that's not, they're also stuck in that financial livelihood.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have a lot of debt, and the bankers aren't willing to finance switching to organic because they see that as very high risk. And they also don't understand economics 101, which is that the more you grow of a commodity, the lower the price. So it's this hamster wheel that you can't get out of.
Yeah, that seems to be that there's a very big difference between the farmers and all of the businesses that support that system with, the inputs, the equipment, the chemicals, very different. So you say that the big justification for all of that is that we're feeding the world. Are they?
No, not at all. They're feeding cars. They're feeding obesity. They're feeding their wallets.
Maria, are you familiar with the Nature article that says basically that organic farming is bad for the climate, and chemical farming is better because it's more intensive, and so you can allow more land to be rewilded?
So the one thing that I have seen over and over again, both in my real life and in the research, is that the chemical industry will put so much money and effort into buying research and ad campaigns to convince people, whether it's on social media or in journals, that they're doing the right thing. So, organic is bad. It's like, it's so classic and happens so rarely. It's almost funny, but it's not funny because people get confused. And so that's just one of their tactics. It's like the cigarette companies, and it's the exact same tactic. And
yes, the merchants of doubt.
Yeah. So the sad thing is that people fall for it.
There's a wonderful quotation that a tobacco executive said, "Doubt is our product."
Right.
And as long as they could keep enough public doubt about whether cigarettes were actually killing you, they could keep going just as they were. And finally, they just couldn't.
Right.
Just the dominoes just fell, and they couldn't.
And I feel like we're getting close to that tipping point with organic, in that, there is so much cancer that's happening. I was just talking with Art Cullen from Iowa. He's a reporter, and Pulitzer Prize winning author from Iowa. And, Iowa has the second highest cancer rate in the country, and Kentucky has the first highest rate. And their water is polluted. I mean, it's just like, it's a disaster. And at what point do people just say, like, enough?
Yeah. We'll find out. We haven't quite hit it yet.
Well, hopefully after they read my book, which won't come out for another 2 years, but
Yeah.
still.
Good. No. Okay. So let's go to the Twinkie debate for a minute.
The Twinkie debate?
The Twinkie debate. So there was a famous interchange between two people on the National Organic Standards Board, Gene Kahn, founder of Cascadian Farms, and Joan Dye Gussow. They were both members of the National Organic Standards Board in this period. It was quite a while ago. And Joan said, you can't have an organic Twinkie. Organic means whole food. It means something that's healthy. It doesn't mean just having ingredients that happen to be certified as organic. And Gene said, I reject that completely. Organic is not your mother, and it should be able to compete on junk food as well as on whole food. Do you have an opinion about that?
I really do, because I grew up with so many mixed messages around food and denial of things, so like, I didn't even know what a Twinkie was till I think that conversation happened. And and I was not allowed to have a lot of things, but then I also had a lot of things, so it's like, there was not a clear sense of, like, what is good and what is bad. Chemicals are bad, but also sugar is bad, but then it's not bad, so it was very chaotic. And I definitely, as a child who felt denied, candy, and I wanted to taste everything, and I wanted to know, what is this thing? What, how good is it? And like, in Pennsylvania, we don't have Twinkies as much as we have Tasty Cakes, but like, Tasty Cakes are awesome. But as I've grown up, what I've realized is that they're two separate things. There's chemicals that go into how we grow food, how we tend lawns and golf courses. They're all the same bad chemicals that should be eradicated. And then there's health, which is a very different thing and a very personal thing. Like, now that I'm grown up and I've got kids and grandkids, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of organic, cake, great, but it's not that, it's not the end of the world. And that's what I meant by, in the early days, there were a lot of these factions. And I think each person's body is, on some level, unique and needs to find its own definition of health. And for some people, that's, veganism. For some people, that's paleo. It really is a personal decision. And I think, whole grains are great and people should eat them, and vegetables are great and people should eat them, but everything should be organic.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's a little
Well,
confusing.
it does make sense, Maria, but I'm trying to think the challenge that we face is, and overwhelmingly bad food system in which the majority of the food that we eat is ultra processed.
Yes.
Majority. It's
Yeah.
almost unthinkable to me
Yeah.
because actually I don't eat almost anything that would qualify as ultra processed. And that's, as
Mhm.
you say, my personal choice. I don't try and push that on the people I love and hang out with. But I do see that what is going on is not just innocent. It's not just about personal choice. That's the great line of defense. We're not trying to take away people's personal choice. Well, actually, they are. They are trying to control what people eat. They're not doing it by making it illegal to eat whole food, but they are doing it by how they control the food system.
I definitely agree with that. Which is why, like, if you want to eat a Twinkie, you should make it from scratch using organic ingredients. But the reality is, a lot of people don't have access to real healthy food, and the processed stuff is the only thing that they can really afford. In fact, I was watching the documentary King Corn, and it was done a while ago, over 10 years ago, I think. But the guys in the film actually went and found Earl Butz in his retirement home, and they were like, they were like, are you happy with how things turned out? And he goes, absolutely, because what we were trying to do was make food as cheap as possible. And we succeeded. Like, food is as cheap as possible. And unfortunately, most people think about food in terms of money more than in terms of quality. And for a lot of people, that's all they can afford. So it's a whole systemic dilemma that we're in.
Absolutely. I would be suspicious of the idea that bad food is cheaper. I think it's cheaper because we, the taxpayers, subsidize it.
Exactly. But you have to realize, like, if you're on a very tight budget and you're going to the supermarket or a Dollar Tree, for your food.
Yes. You have very few
No.
choices. You have
Right.
very few choices. But I do think that the reason that the choices you're offered are so bad is because as a society, we're supporting the bad food. We're
Right.
supporting it. We make the corn so cheap
Yeah.
because we pay them to grow it that way.
Right. Yeah, no, it's terrible.
Yeah. So I think that the question is, how can we change the food system so that is not the low cost choice?
Well, I think, are you asking me for my opinion on that?
Sure, go ahead, Maria.
I mean, that's the huge question, and it's a combination of political change, economic change, but it all starts with, and this is what I think my grandfather and father understood most, is that it's individual people changing. So when individual people understand what needs to happen and how to do it, we're unstoppable. And that's what changes the world and that's why that confusion is so dangerous. Just like you said, doubt, and so I've been doing a lot of talking with just regular moms and regular people, and like, oh, what do you think of organic? And they're so confused about it because they get all these mixed messages. And at the end of the day, it's like, it's about trust. And how can people trust their food? But with the political situation the way it is now, I mean, how can we trust anything?
Yeah, I agree, but it will never be simple because there's too much money to be made by challenging organic, and we just have to give up the idea that it's not fair or they shouldn't do that. The tobacco companies did what they did because they were making gazillions of dollars,
Right.
and There are other people making even more gazillions of dollars. Although tobacco did move into ultra-processed foods in a significant way when it became illegal for them to promote them quite so adamantly in the U.S., they switched to Twinkies. That's what the change. Let's change channel just for a minute. Let's talk about the great certification debate. Now, it's not such a public debate right now, although I seem to be getting a great deal of news about it. But I interviewed Patrick Holden, who I don't know if you know Patrick, but
I did.
he was called one of the Young Turks in the Soil Association, and Lady Eve Balfour was the founder and the person most respected, and it was her opinion that there should not be organic certification. She thought that would undercut and even demean organic because it would become so tarnished by economic forces trying to manipulate what counts as organic. And Patrick had the opposite point of view, which is that if we're going to change the world, we have to make this something that is available to most people. And to do that successfully and to get into the stores and make it that people can get the food they want, we need certification. And I take the point of view that they were both right. I'm curious what your response would be.
Well, what I'm finding in my research is that there's a lot of people in the organic movement who see, and I would put what Lady Eve's comments were. And by the way, I have a daughter named Eve, quite named after Lady Eve. So I'm a fan. But they see organic as more of a spiritual, like purity. It's not just about the soil, it's about the whole way of life and that, like a way of being in the world. And like, I'm all for that. That's great. But I'm also a businesswoman and a mom and a pragmatist. And I think I know how hard it was to get that label. And it's not perfect, but for the average person, that label is essential. And that label is what has moved the movement forward faster than almost anything. I would say actually the thing that people talk about the most, a couple things, is what moved the movement forward. One was Silent Spring, the book. The second was the ALAR campaign, which I was involved with back before the label. And then the third was actually having a label. These are the things that push us forward. And each thing that pushes us forward gets us a little bit closer to a better world and a more perfect world. But like, I don't want a perfect world for just the Lady Eves on their estates or, even the Elliots on his perfect farm. I want it for everybody. And that takes a very diverse way of thinking about the whole movement. And actually, diversity is a fundamental benefit of organic soil. It's diverse.
Yes.
An organic landscape is diverse.
I don't think you'll get much disagreement about that. But let's go a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, part of the success of organic is because large corporations have come in and embraced it, and
because people have asked for it.
The market is there.
Yeah, the market
is there.
And the
so
market is people.
Driscoll's is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Driscoll's is over 70% of the organic berries sold in America come from Driscoll's,
mm-hmm.
right? Organic is less than 30% of what Driscoll sells. So there's 75% or whatever is chemical berries,
Mm-hmm.
and with all the problems. So you've got a company, but 70% is clearly a monopoly. And what's wrong with that? Because we go, great, look at that. You can go and get organic berries in virtually any supermarket in America now. It's amazing. You can probably get organic blueberries in any large supermarket in Kansas or Mississippi. It's amazing. It's not just this coastal elite thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason that hydroponic is certified as organic is because of Driscoll's, in my opinion. And I was there watching it happen. So, as Zephyr Teachout said, the problem with making a deal with the devil is that you won't like what happens next. And it won't be organic anymore. It will be something else. So that's my question, is this dream of your grandfather and your father and you, is this in danger of being lost because we're successful?
Absolutely not. And now let me speak as a business person, and also from a lot of farmers I know. There's this concept of like testing. You don't just like say, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it all on all my acres or on all my business. I'm going to test. I'm going to test into this market. I'm going to experiment, so you don't risk your whole business. You want to, be cautiously optimistic and test that things are viable or not, and that they're going to continue to make money. So, a lot of farmers I know that are transitioning, they start with a few dozen or a few hundred acres out of their thousands. And then they say, oh, okay, I can now see how to make this happen. The fact that Driscoll's is a monopoly has nothing to do with organic. I mean, that has to do with business and economics and other things. And, my issue with Driscoll's is actually probably more how they treat their workers than, whether it's hydroponic or not. So two things. One, my granddaughter's coming over next week, and my daughter said, can you pick up some strawberries? Because that's what she wants on her birthday cake. I'm going to buy the Driscoll strawberries because that's all that is available. And I'm going to buy them organic because I don't want chemicals in her little body, her precious little body. I don't care if it's hydroponic. I just don't want those chemicals in her little body. And, but, I think I've also mentioned to you in the past that this is what the regenerative organic label that the Rodale Institute created with Dr. Bronner's in Patagonia is all about, which is ensuring that workers, fair wages, human rights, animal welfare is part of the whole process, and soil. So the regenerative organic label has, is soil-based. And so that's progress. We're making progress. I mean, I think my grandfather would be stunned to see how far we've come. And even my father. Like, they never walked into a Whole Foods. They didn't know what Amazon was. That doesn't mean those are good outcomes, but they've changed how people have access to things, and they've enabled more people to have access to things.
Okay, well, let me ask you, you wrote Organic Manifesto, How Organic Farming Can Heal Our Planet, Feed the World, and Keep Us Safe. About 14 years ago, it came out. The same question I asked Michael Pollan, I'm asking a lot of people this question now. In those 14 years, has the food system gotten better or worse?
Both. I think, and I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it's both. Even just from a government regulation standpoint now, like the lack of regulations on all food, not just organic, all food is causing more foodborne illnesses, more chemicals. But on the positive side of that, I think more studies have come out there's a lot of studies right now showing the damages from ultra processed food that people are paying attention to. So that's good. Bad, but good. And then on the organic side, like I was just in New York City last week and found out about a small little store called Happier. I never heard of it. A friend of mine told me about it. He said, "Oh, you should go look at this store." I mean, and sure, it's exclusive, but it's like everything was organic, and it was fully stocked. It was like a mini, bigger than a health food store, smaller than a Trader Joe's, on Canal Street, and it was packed, and the food was great, and there's things happening all the time like that would have never happened 14 years ago.
Okay.
And that's happening all across the country, I think. Just
Yeah.
farmers markets. I mean, in 14 years, farmers markets have exploded. Like they were just starting back then.
Yeah. I see this from the perspective of my farm, and it's much worse. Not even, not better. It's much worse because I'm losing access to market after market after market. You said, yeah, the only ones I could get were from Driscoll's. Well, that's right. That's the impact of a monopoly. That's not because everybody says, I want Driscoll's. That's because Driscoll's makes a deal with the supermarket saying, if you want our strawberries, you will not carry competition.
Yeah.
And I experience it with tomatoes, selling into stores, and suddenly they don't want our tomatoes because they got too many tomatoes. But the other 9 pints of little guys they get are all from one company. And they've made a deal with that. They've made a deal with that store. If you want our tomatoes, you won't carry anybody else's.
So I would say that's not a function of organic working.
I didn't ask if it was a function of organic. I asked, is the food system getting better or worse?
Well, I would say that's more of a business challenge, and I think a lot of organic farmers are facing this, where you can't just do one thing anymore, and you have to constantly be adapting and changing, and so to make a living, you can't just grow tomatoes anymore. You have to figure out ways, maybe it's the Real Organic Project tomato sauce that then gets into supermarkets or things like that. So that there has to be this constant innovation and evolution that happens on all sides. That's just business 101, really.
Yeah. I'm mourning the loss of capitalism amazingly, Maria. Imagine that, because it's not where I came from. But as I've come to learn more about it, and I wouldn't say that I'm a great proponent of capitalism, but I would say that what we have is not capitalism. It's not. It's monopoly. It's growing monopoly, growing oligarchy, growing reduction of diversity and choices in the marketplace. And that's true of organic, which is getting bigger and bigger in its sales, but the choices, I believe, are getting less and less.
I would respectfully and politely disagree, because as a shopper and as, I told, we have a very wonderful, small, but like 7 or 8 store chain in Pennsylvania called Kimberton Whole Foods. It's not related to the Amazon Whole Foods. It's its own thing. They were Whole Foods before Whole Foods was Whole Foods. And,
right.
I was talking to Terry Brett, who's the owner and founder of that. And I was like, I am an Olympic shopper. I mean, that's my sport. Is I'll go to like 6 or 7 different stores and farm stands to get what I think is the best in every place. And so, yeah, that's a challenge for me because I can't just go to one place. But boy, the choices that I can have as somebody who loves food and loves to cook and loves fresh organic foods is amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I grew up trying to buy this stuff, so like
Absolutely, absolutely. There are things that when I was a kid you could not get, period, in
Period.
a supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
There was no such thing as whole wheat flour. There was no
Exactly.
such thing as whole wheat bread.
Yeah.
And you still probably can't get whole wheat flour or whole wheat bread, but I mean, you can
Oh
get
no,
stuff
you can.
labeled. I know, but the whole wheat flour is not whole wheat. They took out the germ because they need to bag it, and it would degrade and it
Yeah.
would become rancid.
Yeah.
So if you want whole wheat flour, you pretty much have to grind it yourself, unless you happen to live close to somebody else who's grinding it. It's complicated,
It is.
and that's exactly what I mean. These are complicated things, and I don't believe that the bread you can buy tastes even vaguely like the best bread that can be made. It's just that bread is not available on store shelves.
Well, I mean, so I and two of my daughters have gone gluten-free because, they get migraines, I get acid reflux and cough. And I think that is a function of the use of Roundup for desiccation on, breads, wheat, the genetic breeding so that, it's more, it's more productive, but it's not as digestible. And more people, I mean, this is why gluten-free is everywhere. So like, who even eats bread anymore? I mean, you can't. Well, good for you. Lucky
But
you.
but I grind it and I bake it, and it's delicious. And I'll bet you would be fine with it, and your daughters would be fine with it.
Yeah,
That's an
but
interesting question.
unless you turn it into a business, I'm not coming up to where you are to buy my bread.
I understand. So you got to
And
go gluten free.
I
But
don't have time to do it myself. So,
I get it. If you lived in Europe, those problems might evaporate. I've talked to so many people who said, geez, I went to Europe and suddenly I'm not gluten intolerant and I
I'm
can eat anything.
I'm seeing more and more Europeans who are going gluten-free, and even like I just saw on Instagram a whole town in Italy that's a gluten-free town. So I think, unfortunately, our chemical bad breeding habits have spread around the
Yeah.
world, and
Yeah.
We have to stop it.
Yeah. So just to go back for a minute, you said something that was interesting to me. The three big turning points for organic, the things that were the big events. And the first was Silent Spring,
Mm-hmm.
Rachel Carson's transformative book. And the second was the Alar scare,
Mm-hmm.
in which people were getting sick from the apples that they were eating, right? And
Mm-hmm.
from a pesticide that was being sprayed on them.
Mm-hmm.
And the third was certification. So the first two involved scaring people.
Mm-hmm.
They were wake up calls that things are not working as well as we had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I get said, people say to me, is you need to be more positive, Dave. You've got to reach for the stars instead of say we have got to get away from this demon that's chasing us.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually had this conversation with Rock, because they're very positive in their messaging, and I'm not positive. I think there are some pretty bad things going on that people are not aware of. The merchants of doubt have been very successful
Mm-hmm.
at confusing people, including about regenerative,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Bayer loves regenerative. Syngenta loves regenerative. Pepsi loves regenerative. And if you're not going to call them out for that, then the word becomes meaningless. So I'm curious what you think about that. Do we have to face the hard truths?
So I guess what I didn't say, one of the other, one of the other founding moments is the launch of Organic Gardening Magazine. And that was positive. That was positive. It wasn't like, oh, we have to fight. It was like, no, just do this, grow this, eat this. When I was my first job out of college, I was working for a progressive public relations firm in Washington, D.C. that was, anti-Contra, anti-nuclear, anti everything, And it was like fighting the good fight. And then halfway through the year, and my father told me I only had a year. Had to come back in a year. I was like, gee, where can I go to work that's for something instead of just against something? And it was like, that's the moment I realized, oh, Rodale Press, Rodale Institute is for something. It's for positive change. There is always going to be negative, bad stuff. Always. I mean, look at just, what's happened in the last 24 hours with, shootings and stabbings. I mean, people are terrible. People are terrible. And it's not just white people. It's all, a lot of people are terrible. And so all we can do is be the positive force of good. That's all we can do.
Okay.
Only thing worth doing.
Okay.
Try.
One last thing. I'm just curious. Prevention, which
Mhm.
I confess I've never read the magazine, was that relentlessly positive? Obviously, it's very positive in its message, just as Real Organic is very positive in its message. We're saying there is something better. It's very possible. It's being done widely. I'm just curious, was prevention also calling out the things people shouldn't do?
So there's many different eras of Prevention magazine. And, the initial era was very, I would say, positive, but also balanced. Like, here's what you shouldn't do, but here's what you can do. And here's the research. It was always very research based. My grandfather wanted it to be like a medical journal for the people so that, it was understandable and easy to read. But what happened later in its life, and I remember having this argument with the editor at the time. I was like, why aren't you telling people to eat organic vegetables? You're always like, eat fruits and vegetables. Like, why aren't you telling them about eating organic? And he's like, well, we don't want to scare them so that they don't eat any vegetables. And it was like, oh. So there was definitely a disconnect there. And then later, it became more of a weight loss magazine, and
Yeah.
partly because that's what sold on the newsstand. That's what people bought. They wanted to read how to lose weight. And partly, one of the reasons I was glad to sell the company is because, like, I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. And while we were publishing weight loss information relentlessly, people were getting fatter than ever. So, like, something was not right. And my heart was always on the organic and nature side of things. That was where I was passionate. I was never a runner or an athlete, So honestly, I'm glad I don't own it anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Everything always keeps changing, and sometimes it changes for the better and the worse. Sometimes it just goes one direction or another. That's why I think it's so important that we be awake and aware, so we can protect what is truly valuable in organic. I think organic movement is a great gift. It's such a valuable thing, but it can be lost. Fascinating for me to look back at some of the twists and turns of, even predating the word organic, but, the famous eco-fascism of Nazi Germany, where they embraced biodynamic. Not all biodynamic wanted to be embraced. So there was a big division in the community, it's sort of like, well, everyone agreed about health and about food, but they didn't agree about democracy and those little things like freedom. So good things can be used for bad purposes.
Right. And everything is very complicated and interconnected, and
yeah Yeah.
Yeah.
When you said that about prevention evolving and leaving out organic, it reminded me of a lot of the modern food as medicine movement,
Mhm.
and which is wonderful. It's like, great. People are saying we need to get organized. We need to figure out how to have an institutional response to ultra-processed foods, which are getting crammed down the throats of our kids to their detriment. But they kind of leave organic out of it completely. When they just say, stop eating ultra-processed food, eat whole foods, it's fine if it's chemically grown. And I get it. It is better. It is better, but it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I have very mixed feelings about the whole I guess the way I'd say it is, throughout history, as old as time, there's always grifters who are selling miracle cures. I mean, that's just human nature. And that even religion is sort of that. Religion is like a miracle cure of like, you'll get to heaven if you just give me money. So so a lot of what I think is like why we're here on earth is to sort of sort through all that like grift garbage and find what's real. And what is real is like good food grown organically with love, cooked with love, in balance, and it's local. Like what for like. I remember hearing about a person in Italy saying, like, on one side of the mountain, they used butter for all their cooking because they had cows. On the other side, they used olive oil because they had olive trees. So, where you are depends on what is really the most healthy thing for you, I think.
Yeah.
And, but you can't force that on people. In a way, you have to seduce them into it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
nobody wants to be like scolded to be seduced.
Good. Okay. Maria Rodale, thank you. We will work on, as Alice Waters said, the delicious revolution.
Exactly.
So thank you very much for
You're
talking
welcome.
today.
Thank you for all you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. If you have a spare minute today, the single most effective way you can help us grow this movement and others to find this podcast is by leaving us a rating and a review wherever you listen to our podcast. You can find a video version of this interview on our website or on our YouTube channel, and you can join us every Sunday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. And if you haven't already, please sign up for our weekly newsletter at realorganicproject.org/email. See you next time.